Now, one of the first subjects that we were going to talk about this evening was quality versus quantity. There's always the big debate about, well, do you buy the expensive ones in the blue chip suburbs, or do you buy the cheap ones maybe further out? A bit like going for maybe the bluechip.com shares rather than the blue chips. So on the discussion tonight, maybe think about, would you rather buy maybe 2 to 3 500 to 750 grand properties, so roughly 1.5 million, or for the same money, would you rather 5 or 6 250 to 300 grand properties? So both ways, 1.5 million in property. Cameron, I'll jump to you to start with. What would you say, first of all, for the suburbs? Where are the two types of suburbs going to be for those two different types of properties?
An outperforming property, or a property that we would deem as being a property of quality, would most likely be something that is based within the CBD of a capital city, of course, either Melbourne or Sydney or numerous other states in Australia. What the difference would be either a fringe suburb or a regional suburb. So what you would find is, or a regional city I should say, so what you would find is that there's an ability to purchase property in fringe suburbs and regional areas for a lot less than what you would pay in the inner city. And the concern obviously there is the potential for that property to be rented, and those sorts of things that would be discussed obviously through the process. And
so typically with the capital growth, in your opinion, do you believe you'll get more or less capital growth if you're in the inner city versus an outer city? And why do you think that is?
History will clearly show you that the inner city will give you longer, more sustained, outperforming growth over a period of time, no doubt.
Yep.
If I could just pick up there too, we just had a client just recently who bought a property in one of the provincial cities just outside Melbourne, not that far, and he bought, I think it was 4 properties, very proud of the 4 properties he bought. He's only a young guy, about 28, and but he came to me the other day and spoke about the portfolio while I was reviewing the portfolio, and it was interesting. He said, one of my mates has got 1 property. He bought it with the assistance of a buyer's advocate, bought a really good one, and the interesting thing is, in 12 months, that 1 property has done better than his whole 4 has done over 5 or 6 years. So whether it's in the country areas, the provincial cities, whether it's in the outer suburban areas, sometimes it's just an opportunity cost where people aren't getting the sort of returns that they should, and they can get those returns just by investing in less. And we're rationalising portfolios like that for clients on review all the time to get them into better properties, give them better returns, and they've got fewer problems because there are fewer properties to worry about.
So do you think that if you're buying, say, more expensive properties in the blue chip suburbs, that's more of a guarantee, whereas going into the outer suburbs is maybe more speculative, that it may work for you, it may double overnight, but it may just stay flat for 5 or 6 years?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important factor, that a lot of people who go to the next big suburb, it may or may not eventuate. Some people, for example, they might go to some of the outer suburban areas and buy land on spec, and they don't realise they're competing against some of the big names and the big home builders and Dennis Family Homes and Hemleys and some of the big ones that are out there buying acres and acres, and they're land banking them for years. And the thing is, the government might even change the policy where they can no longer build on it. They did that recently in Melbourne, where they found a rare grass.
And so you're obviously looking after the financial perspective. In terms of risk, where do the banks see the risk? I.e. the more expensive inner city, or again, the cheaper outer, which are probably more affordable maybe?
The banks all have scales about and zones where they want to lend the highest amount. So if a bank is going to lend 95% of the value of the property, you know it's a pretty good bet, because they've done their research, and so have the insurers behind them. So in the inner suburban areas, no question the risk is much lower. I'd put the risk typically in a blue chip suburb with the right property that maybe Cameron has found, or you found for your clients in Sydney, as being maybe 3 out of 10, because the capital growth there much more readily available to sell, and many more buyers. When you go to those outlying areas, if anything happens to the economy, who gets hit first? Lower income. Who lives out there? Often the lower income earners. So I think the risk is much greater in the outer areas as well as the regional areas.